What if everything you thought you knew about the sister wives was only half the story? While the cameras captured family unity, each wife was secretly building her own financial escape plan. And what happened next changed everything forever. Before we begin, subscribe now, because the shocking truth we uncover today is something most fans completely missed. What looked like a story about family loyalty and shared values was quietly becoming something else entirely, and almost nobody watching at home realized it at the time. Because while millions of viewers were focused on the emotional moments, the celebrations, the arguments, and the promises of unity, a completely different story was unfolding behind the scenes. A story hidden inside shipping boxes, online orders, product launches, and late-night planning sessions. Because each woman in the family had started moving in a direction that would eventually reveal a truth far. When people looked back at the evidence, the pattern was obvious. But during those years, it remained hidden beneath carefully crafted narratives and positive social media posts. While audiences believed they were watching a story about family unity, the women themselves were increasingly focused on personal survival. And the deeper you look into that reality, the more surprising the story becomes. Because these were not simply hobby projects or casual interests. These ventures represented something much larger. They represented preparation. Preparation for possibilities that nobody wanted to discuss openly. And preparation for a future that might look very different from the one being presented on television. Among the first noticeable shifts was the decision to enter the booming world of direct sales and lifestyle products, a trend that dominated social media and attracted countless individuals who hoped to create additional income streams from home. The promise sounded appealing: flexibility, independence, personal branding, and the opportunity to earn money while maintaining family responsibilities. For someone balancing multiple obligations, it seemed like an ideal solution. And that promise attracted millions across the country, including members of the Brown family. One by one, they entered different business categories: fashion, wellness, lifestyle products, and specialty merchandise, each believing they had found a path forward. Each believing that hard work combined with visibility could create something meaningful. And at first, the results appeared encouraging. Social media engagement increased, supporters expressed enthusiasm, products sold, and the excitement of building something new generated momentum. But momentum can be deceptive, because early enthusiasm does not always translate into lasting success, and that reality would eventually become impossible to avoid. Christine became one of the most
that does not produce expected outcomes. Mary was not alone in facing that challenge, because countless others across the direct sales landscape encountered similar experiences. They worked hard, remained committed, and believed success was just around the corner, only to discover that effort alone could not overcome structural limitations built into highly competitive markets. Meanwhile, the most surprising part of the entire story was not that the businesses struggled, and it was not even that the family relationships eventually changed, because many viewers had already seen warning signs long before any public confirmations arrived. The real surprise was what happened after years of chasing opportunities that promised freedom but rarely delivered it. Because once the noise started fading, and once the pressure of maintaining a carefully crafted image began disappearing, something unexpected emerged. The women who had spent years trying to fit themselves into business models created by other people slowly started discovering that their greatest asset had never been the products they promoted or the brands they represented. Their greatest asset was the connection they had built with millions of viewers over more than a decade. And that realization changed everything. Because trust, when earned over many years, carries a value that cannot be measured by inventory, sales, marketing campaigns, or temporary trends. Yet for a very long time, that trust had been directed toward ventures that did not fully reflect who they were as individuals. Audiences supported them because they liked them, not necessarily because they wanted leggings, jewelry.
Sustainability. because many opportunities that appear attractive during periods of rapid growth depend heavily on circumstances that eventually change. Consumer behavior evolves, social media platforms update policies, market saturation increases, and public attitudes shift. What works today may become ineffective tomorrow, which means businesses built entirely around temporary momentum often struggle once that momentum disappears. Sustainable success generally requires something deeper, something capable of surviving changing trends and shifting public attention. For the women involved, that deeper foundation eventually became personal credibility and audience trust, assets that remained valuable even after specific products lost popularity or specific business models fell out of favor. This distinction helps explain why some ventures faded while others continued growing, because audiences were not attached to every product, they were attached to the people themselves. Once those people began building projects rooted in authentic interests rather than temporary opportunities, the foundation became significantly stronger and more resilient. Looking back, it becomes clear that the original side hustles represented both a challenge and a stepping stone. They exposed vulnerabilities within the family structure, but they also provided experiences that later proved useful. Marketing, communication, audience engagement, branding, and entrepreneurship all require skills that improve through practice. Even unsuccessful ventures can teach valuable lessons about what audiences respond to and what they ignore. By the time major life transitions occurred, the women possessed years of experience navigating public attention, online business, and personal branding, experience that could be redirected toward more authentic pursuits. And in many cases, that is exactly what happened. Rather than abandoning entrepreneurship entirely, they refined it. Rather than giving up on independence, they redefined it. And rather than chasing opportunities built around someone else's framework, they increasingly focused on creating opportunities aligned with their own identities. This evolution transformed the narrative from one centered on financial uncertainty into one centered on personal reinvention, which may explain why so many viewers remained invested even after major family changes occurred. People are naturally drawn to stories of resilience, especially when those stories involve individuals overcoming challenges in highly visible circumstances. And few situations are more visible than navigating personal transformation in front of a national audience.
Years after the first side hustles appeared, and long after fans began noticing cracks in the family image, the biggest revelation was not hidden inside a financial report, a television episode, or even a public announcement. It was hidden inside the pattern that connected everything together. Because when people looked back at the journey from beginning to end, a surprising truth emerged. The women who once seemed to be following separate paths had actually been moving toward the same destination all along: independence. And the road to that destination was far more complicated than anyone expected. Because independence is rarely achieved in a single moment. It develops through years of difficult choices, disappointments, lessons, and unexpected opportunities. And for these women, every failed venture, every stressful move, every uncertain conversation, and every attempt to create financial stability became part of a much larger transformation that audiences were only beginning to understand. At first, the side hustles looked like ordinary business experiences, the kind of projects countless reality television personalities launch while trying to expand their brands. But the longer the story continued, the clearer it became that something deeper was happening. Because these ventures were never just about making extra income. They represented a search for certainty in an environment that increasingly felt uncertain. Every product sold, every social media campaign, every customer interaction, and every late-night planning session carried a purpose that extended beyond profit. They were creating options, and options become extremely valuable when people begin questioning whether the future they once imagined will actually happen. The fascinating part is that most viewers never noticed the shift while it was occurring. Because reality television often focuses attention on dramatic moments, arguments, emotional confrontations, and major announcements, while quieter developments happen unnoticed in the background. Yet those quieter developments often reveal more about what people truly believe than anything they say publicly. And in this case, the
quiet development was unmistakable. 4 women, each
became one of the most revealing elements of the entire story because actions often communicate concerns long before words do. And these actions suggested that each woman understood something important years before audiences fully recognized it. Circumstances can change, relationships can evolve, and security that appears permanent may not always remain that way. Once that realization enters a person's mind, preparation becomes almost impossible to avoid, which explains why the side hustles continued despite obstacles, setbacks, and inconsistent results. The projects themselves varied, but the motivation behind them remained remarkably similar. And that motivation became even more significant as larger family changes unfolded. Because when relationships eventually reached breaking points, the women were not starting from zero. They already possessed experience, confidence, and at least some level of independent identity outside the family structure. That identity mattered because rebuilding a life after major transitions requires more than financial resources. It requires belief in your own ability to adapt and survive. And in many ways, the years spent pursuing entrepreneurial ventures had quietly strengthened exactly those skills, even when the ventures themselves struggled to succeed. This perspective changes the entire interpretation of the story because it suggests that the real value of the side hustles was not measured by revenue, but by preparation.